The phone rang at 6:47 in the morning. Earl Bristow was already sitting at the kitchen table because he had been sitting at the kitchen table every morning at 6:47 for 46 years. The coffee was hot. The mug was the same white ceramic mug with the faded John Deere logo that Lorraine had bought him in 1987. The chair was the same oak chair his grandfather Henry had built in 1929. The table was scarred and worn smooth by 3 generations of elbows and hands in mourning silence. The phone screen said Sarah. He picked it up. Dad, his daughter said, and there was something in her voice that made Earl's hand tighten on the mug. Are you sitting down? I am. There's an auction notice in the paper this morning. The Madison County Gazette, page 7. Earl did not say anything. Outside the window above the sink, the light was gray. Dawn was coming up slow over the fields the way dawn had come up slow over these fields for 97 years. Dad, are you there? I'm here. They're auctioning the south half of your property. Today, 10 o'clock at the courthouse. Earl looked down at his coffee. The surface was still. He could see his own reflection in it, distorted and dark. Dad, I heard you. They can't do that, can they? They can't auction your land without telling you. No, Earl said. They can't. He hung up. For a moment he sat without moving. The house was quiet. It had been quiet since Lorraine died in the winter of 2017. Pancreatic cancer. 6 months from diagnosis to funeral. She had been 69 years old. They had been married for 43 years. The house had not stopped being quiet since. Earl stood. His knees hurt the way they hurt every morning. He was 74 years old. He had lived in this house for 68 of those years. He had been born in the bedroom upstairs in January of 1951. His father, William, had been born in the same bedroom in 1923. His grandfather, Henry, had built the bedroom in 1929 with lumber milled from timber on the North Ridge. He walked to the coat rack by the door and pulled on his brown canvas jacket. The jacket was older than most of the trucks in the county. He put on his cap. He went out to the truck. The drive into town took 11 minutes. The roads were empty. The sky was lightening, but the sun had not cleared the horizon yet. Earl drove past fields he had known his entire life. The Patterson farm, the old Gunderson place that was subdivided now into 5-acre lots with new houses that looked like they belonged somewhere else. The Morrison farm, or what used to be the Morrison farm before Frank Morrison lost it last year to a company Earl had never heard of. He parked at the gas station on Main Street and went inside. The place smelled like burnt coffee and diesel fuel. He bought a copy of the Madison County Gazette from the rack by the counter. The kid behind the register was maybe 19 and did not look up from his phone. Earl took the paper to the truck. He unfolded it in the driver's seat. Page 7 was in the back section. The legal notices that nobody read unless they had to. The notice was in the lower right corner, set in small type, inside a black border. Public auction. Legal description, south 120 acres of Section 14, Township 76, Range 28, Madison County, Iowa. Sale to be held 10 a.m. Monday on the steps of the Madison County Courthouse, Winterset, Iowa. Seller Riverbend Asset Holdings, LLC. Earl read the notice 3 times. The words did not change. The legal description was the south half of his farm. The parcel his grandfather Henry had broken with a team of Mauls in 1928. The pasture where Earl had learned to drive a tractor when he was 12. The land William Bristow had told him never to sell. Riverbend Asset Holdings, LLC. He had never heard of Riverbend Asset Holdings. He started the truck and drove home. Inside, he walked through the kitchen and down the narrow hallway to the small room that had been Lorraine's sewing room. She had spent hours in here, the hum of the machine, a constant background sound in the house for 40 years. After she died, Earl had left everything the way it was. The thread spools were still arranged by color on the shelf above the table. Her reading glasses were folded on the windowsill. The fabric she had been working on a quilt for Sarah's oldest boy was still draped over the chair. Earl opened the closet. The closet smelled like dust and old wool. On the top shelf behind a stack of hat boxes that had not been opened since 1995 was a cardboard tube. The tube was long and yellowed at the ends. The cardboard had softened over the years. Earl reached up and took it down. It was lighter than he remembered, or maybe his arms were just weaker now. He carried it to the kitchen table and set it beside the John Deere mug. He sat down in the oak chair. He looked at the tube. He had not opened this tube in 44 years. The last time he had seen it was in 1981, when his father handed it to him in this kitchen, in this chair at this table. William Bristow had been 68 years old that year. He had been sick, though he had not said so out loud. His hands had shaken when he held the tube. His face had been gray. Earl, his father, had said, "I'm giving you the farm." Earl had been 30 years old. He had been farming alongside his father for 8 years by then. He had known this moment was coming. "Thank you, Dad." William had set the tube on the table between them. "There's one thing you need to know." "All right. Don't ever sell the south half. Whatever happens, don't sell that." Earl had looked at the tube. "Why not?" "Because of what's in here." "What's in there?" William had pushed the tube across the table. "You can open it if you want, but you don't have to. I never did." Earl had stared at his father. "You never opened it." "No. Grandpa gave this to you. In 1956, when he signed the farm over to me, he told me the same thing I'm telling you. Don't sell the south half. The reason's in the tube." "And you never looked." William had smiled, faint and tired. "I trusted him." "That's all you need to do, Earl. Trust me." Earl had reached for the tube, then stopped. "What if I need to know? Then you'll open it. But if you trust me, you won't need to." That had been the end of the conversation. William Bristow had died 3 years later in 1984 of congestive heart failure. He had been 71. He had never mentioned the tube again. Earl had put it in Lorraine's sewing room closet. He had left it there. In 1985, a neighbor named Dale Hoskins had offered Earl $12,000 for the south pasture. Earl had said no without thinking about it. In 1998, a hog operation out of Des Moines had wanted to lease the south half for confinement buildings. They had offered $30,000 a year. Earl had said no. In 2009, a wind energy company had sent a man in a suit with a clipboard. The man had talked about turbines and lease agreements and long-term revenue. Earl had listened politely and then said no. Lorraine had asked him once in 2003 what was in the cardboard tube on the closet shelf. "I don't know," Earl had said. She had laughed. "That's the most Earl Bristow answer I've ever heard. Dad told me not to sell the south half, so I'm not selling it. But you don't know why." "Don't need to." She had kissed him on the cheek. "You're a good son, Earl." Now sitting at the kitchen table with the auction notice on page 7 of the Madison County Gazette, Earl picked up the tube. It was cool in his hands. The cardboard was soft, almost fabric-like from age. He could feel something inside, something that shifted slightly when he tilted it. He picked up a kitchen knife from the counter and slid the blade under the metal cap on the end of the tube. The cap came off with a small sigh of air that smelled like old paper. He tipped the tube. A roll of paper slid out, tied with a piece of brown string. The string was brittle. The paper was the color of tea-stained cloth. Earl set the tube down. He untied the string. The knot came apart easily, as if it had been waiting for this. He unrolled the paper on the kitchen table. It was a map. The paper was large, maybe 2 feet by 3 feet. The edges were worn soft. The ink was black, faded in places, but still clear. The lines were precise, drawn with a straight edge and a steady hand. In the lower right corner, in small, careful script, was a legend. "Survey of Bristow, Property Section 14, Township 76, Range 28, Madison County, Iowa, April 11th, 1932. J.R. Whitlock, County Surveyor." Earl stared at the map. He was not a surveyor. He was not a lawyer. He was a farmer. But he could read a map. He had been reading plat maps and property surveys since he was old enough to sit on his father's lap at the kitchen table. The map showed the boundaries of the original 640 acres. The section lines, the creek that ran through the northwest quarter, the ridge along the northern edge, the road on the east side, and the south 120 acres. Earl stood and went to the drawer beside the sink. He pulled out the current county plat book, though, one the assessor's office had mailed him last year. He flipped to section 14. He brought the book back to the table and laid it open beside the 1932 survey. The lines did not match. The south boundary on the 1932 survey ran almost a quarter of a mile farther south than the line shown in the current plat book. The difference was significant. It was not a matter of inches. It was not a rounding error. Someone had drawn the line wrong, or someone had changed it. Earl sat down slowly. The land that Riverbend Asset Holdings was trying to auction at 10 o'clock that morning was not the south 120 acres of the Bristow farm. It was somebody else's land. Or more precisely, Riverbend was claiming a parcel that overlapped his land. Both parcels could not exist. One of them was wrong. The 1932 survey showed which one. Earl looked at the clock on the wall. It was 7:41. He had 2 hours and 19 minutes. He picked up the phone and called Tom Reedy. Reedy was a lawyer in Winterset, a man about Earl's age who had gone to high school with Lorraine. He had handled her estate when she died. He had drawn up Earl's will. He was semi-retired now, working 3 days a week out of a small office above the hardware store on the square. The phone rang 4 times. Then Reedy's voice groggy. "Hello. Tom, it's Earl Bristow." Earl was, a pause. "It's not even 8 in the morning. I know, I need your help." "What's wrong?" Earl told him about the auction notice. He told him about the tube and the map. He did not explain why he had never opened the tube before. There was not time. Reedy was quiet on the other end of the line. When he spoke again, his voice was different, sharp. "Earl, I have to ask you something. Is there any chance there's a lien on your property you don't know about? An old mortgage, an unpaid tax, anything?" "No." "You're certain?" "My grandfather paid cash for that land in 1928, $32 an acre. My father paid the inheritance tax in 1956 and again in 1981. I've paid every property tax on time for 45 years. There is no lien." "Then this is fraud, Earl, or it's a clerical error of a kind I've never seen." "Which is it?" "I don't know yet, but the auction is at 10. We have less than 2.5 hours." "I know. Bring everything you have. The map, the tube, any paperwork your father or grandfather left. I'll meet you at the courthouse at 9:30. Earl hung up. He went to the filing cabinet in the corner of the kitchen, the old metal cabinet where William and Henry, before him, had kept the farm records. The top drawer was labeled Land. Earl pulled it open. Inside were folders, some of them so old the paper had turned brown and brittle. He found his grandfather Henry's original deed dated June 14, 1928. Purchase price $20,480 for 640 acres. Paid in full. Seller, a man named Clement McKillum, whose signature was large and looping. Henry's signature was small and tight. The letters compressed as if he had been nervous. Earl found the inheritance paperwork from 1956 when Henry had transferred the farm to William, and the 1981 papers when William had transferred it to Earl. He found 45 years of property tax receipts bundled in rubber bands that had gone brittle and snapped when he touched them. He put everything into a canvas tote bag, the kind Lorraine used to take to the grocery store. He rolled the 1932 map carefully and slid it back into the tube. He capped the tube. He put the tube in the bag. It was 8:03. Earl went out to the truck. The drive to Winterset took 22 minutes. The sun was up now, bright and cold. The fields were brown, waiting for spring. The sky was pale blue, the color it always was in late winter. Earl thought about his grandfather. Henry Bristow had been born in 1870 in Pennsylvania. He had come west in 1897 with his wife Margaret looking for land. They had worked for other farmers for 30 years, saving every dollar. In 1928, when Henry was 58 years old, he had finally bought his own place. 640 acres in Madison County, Iowa. Section 14, Township 76, Range 28. He had broken the sod by hand. He had built the house with his own timber. He had raised William there. He had farmed that land until he was 86 years old when his heart finally gave out in the middle of a July afternoon while he was walking the fence line. William Bristow had been quieter than his father, steadier. He had farmed through the Depression, through the war, through the hard years in the 50s when it seemed like every family in the county was selling out and moving to the cities. He had held on. He had passed the land to Earl in 1981, and then he had died 3 years later, his work done. Earl had always assumed he would do the same. Farm until he could not farm anymore, then pass the land to Sarah. Let her decide what to do with it. She had 2 boys, Michael and Daniel. Maybe one of them would want it. Maybe not. That was not for Earl to decide. But he had assumed he would have the choice. Now someone was trying to take that choice away. Earl parked on the square in Winterset at 9:14. The courthouse was an old limestone building, 3 stories with a clock tower that had not worked since 1987. The steps were worn smooth from 150 years of boots and shoes. Tom Reedy was waiting at the bottom of the steps. He was wearing a dark suit, no tie. His hair was white. He looked older than Earl remembered, but then Earl probably looked older too. Reedy held out his hand. Earl shook it. "Let me see the map," Reedy said. Earl opened the canvas bag. He pulled out the tube and uncapped it. He unrolled the map on the hood of his truck. Reedy leaned over it, his reading glasses low on his nose. He studied it for 90 seconds without speaking. Then he straightened. "Earl, where has this been?" "In a tube. In a closet." "For how long?" "Since 1932. Reedy looked at him. "You're telling me this map has been in your house for 93 years? "Yes. And you just found it." "I knew it was there. I didn't open it until this morning." Reedy took off his glasses. "Earl, this stops the auction. You understand that?" "I understand. But I have to be honest with you. They will fight this. Whoever Riverbend Asset Holdings is, they will say the map is not authenticated. They will say the discrepancy in the records supersedes a 90-year-old survey. We may be in court for a year." "All right. It will cost money. Expert witnesses, surveyors, forensic document examiners. This is not a small case." "I don't care about the money," Reedy nodded slowly. He folded the map along its creases and handed it back. "Then let's go stop an auction." They walked up the courthouse steps together. At the top, near the main entrance, a folding table had been set up. A man in a brown sport coat was standing behind it shuffling papers. A sign propped on the table read, "Public Auction, 10 a.m." The man's name was Bill Crannell. He had been the county auctioneer for 31 years. Earl knew him by sight, though they had never spoken. Crannell was maybe 60, with thinning hair and a face weathered from standing outside at farm sales. There were 11 people gathered near the steps. 3 of them looked like investors, men in their 30s and 40s, wearing business casual clothes and holding clipboards. 2 were neighbors Earl recognized. The rest were courthouse staff on a smoke break, leaning against the railing and talking quietly among themselves. Earl and Reedy stood at the edge of the small crowd. Earl held the canvas bag in both hands. The tube stuck out of the top. At 10:02, Bill Crannell cleared his throat. "All right, folks, let's get started. I've got 3 properties to sell this morning. First one is a residential lot in Maxburg. Second is the parcel we're here for, which is 120 acres in Section 14. Third is a commercial building on the square." He picked up a sheet of paper and read from it. "Legal description for Parcel 2, South 120 acres of Section 14, Township 76, Range 28, Madison County, Iowa. Property offered by Riverbend Asset Holdings, LLC. Opening bid is $400,000. One of the men in business casual clothes raised his hand. 410. Earl raised his hand. Crannell did not see him. Earl was standing toward the back, behind the taller men. He was wearing his brown coat and his cap. He was holding a canvas bag with a cardboard tube sticking out. He looked like a farmer who had stopped by on his way to somewhere else. 4:10, Crandall called. Do I hear 4:20 p.m.? A different man raised his hand. 4:25. Earl raised his hand again, higher this time. Crandall still did not see him. 4:25. Do I hear 4:50? Tom Reedy stepped forward. Mr. Crandall? Crandall paused. He looked at Reedy. Sir, if you have a bid, please state it clearly. Mr. Crandall, I am Thomas Reedy, attorney representing Earl Bristow, the legal owner of the property currently being offered for sale. The crowd went still. Crandall frowned. Sir, this is an auction. If you have an objection, you'll need to file it with the county. I am filing it now. We have evidence of a title defect in the seller's claim. I am formally requesting you halt this auction pending verification. Crandall set down his clipboard. He had been running auctions in Madison County for 31 years. He had never had a lawyer interrupt one. Sir, do you have documentation? Earl walked forward. He set the canvas bag on the folding table. He uncapped the tube. He unrolled the 1932 survey beside Crandall's clipboard. He did not say anything. Crandall looked down at the map. He was not a surveyor. He could not read it the way a surveyor could read it. But he could see that the lines on the map did not match the legal description he had just read aloud. Behind Earl, one of the men in business casual stepped forward. He was younger than the others, maybe 36, with short, dark hair and a sharp suit. He was holding a tablet. That document hasn't been authenticated, the man said. His voice was flat, professional. The seller has a recorded title. This auction is proceeding. Tom Reedy turned to him. And you are Curtis Dean. I represent Riverbend Asset Holdings. Mr. Dean, this map predates your recorded title by 24 years. If there is a discrepancy, the earlier survey takes precedence. If it's legitimate, you could have drawn that map last night. Earl looked at Curtis Dean. Dan looked back. His expression did not change. The paper is 93 years old, Reedy said. The ink is 93 years old. We will prove that. Then prove it in court. This auction is legal and it's proceeding. Behind them, the side door of the courthouse opened. A man in a tan uniform stepped out onto the steps. He was tall, broad-shouldered, with gray hair and a face that had spent a lot of time outdoors. His badge read Madison County Sheriff. His name was Ralph Iverson. He had been sheriff for 16 years. Iverson walked over to the table. He looked at the map. He looked at Crandall. He looked at Dean. Mr. Crandall, Iverson said, I'd like you to suspend this proceeding. Crandall hesitated. Sheriff, I'm contracted to complete this sale. There's a question of whether the seller in this auction has clear title. Until that question is resolved, I'm asking you not to complete this sale. I can ask formally if you'd prefer. Crandall picked up his clipboard. He looked at the three investors who were watching with expressions of irritation and confusion. He looked at Earl. The auction is suspended, Crandall said, pending verification. Curtis Dean started to speak. Iverson turned to him. Sir, Iverson said, I'd like to see your identification. Dean produced a driver's license from a leather wallet. Texas. Iverson wrote down the name. He wrote down the LLC. He wrote down the address on the license. Mr. Dean, Iverson said, I think you'll be hearing from the county attorney. Dean put the license back in his wallet. He looked at Earl. Mr. Bristow, you've delayed the inevitable. We have recorded title. This land will be sold. If not today, then next week. If not next week, then next month. You'll spend everything you have fighting us, and you'll lose anyway. Earl did not answer. He rolled the map carefully. He slid it back into the tube. He put the tube back in the canvas bag. Tom Reedy put a hand on Earl's shoulder. Let's go. They walked down the courthouse steps. Behind them, the crowd was dispersing. The investors were talking on their phones. Bill Crandall was packing up his folding table. Curtis Dean was standing alone near the railing, looking at his tablet. At the bottom of the steps, Reedy stopped. Earl, that was the easy part. I know. They're going to come at you hard. Legal fees, expert witnesses, depositions. This could cost you $50,000, maybe more. I know. And there's no guarantee we win. If a judge decides the county records are the official record, it won't matter what that map says. Earl looked back up at the courthouse. The clock tower stood dark against the pale sky. Tom, my grandfather, broke that land in 1928. He built a house with his own hands. He raised his son there. He gave it to my father with one instruction: don't sell the south half. My father gave it to me with the same instruction. I'm not selling it. I'm not letting someone steal it, whatever it costs. Reedy nodded. All right, let's get to work. Earl drove home. It was 10:47. The sun was higher now, the light sharp and cold. He turned onto the gravel road that led to his property and stopped the truck at the gate. He sat for a moment looking out at the fields. The south 120 acres were visible from here, rolling pasture that dipped down to the creek and then rose again toward the fence line. In the summer, it was green. In the fall, it was gold. In the winter, it was brown and gray and waiting. It did not look like much. It was not flat like the fields farther south. It was not rich black dirt like the river bottoms. It was just land, grass and fence posts and a few old oaks along the creek. But it was his land, his family's land, and someone was trying to take it. Earl put the truck in gear and drove through the gate. He parked in front of the house and went inside. The kitchen was exactly as he had left it. The coffee mug on the table, the newspaper folded open to page 7, the empty tube lying beside the canvas bag. He sat down in the oak chair. His phone buzzed. A text from Sarah. "Dad, are you okay? Did you stop the auction?" He typed back. "Auction is stopped. For now." 3 dots appeared, then disappeared. "Then I'm coming over." She arrived 40 minutes later, driving her blue Honda with a dent in the passenger door from when she had backed into a fence post 2 years ago. She came through the door without knocking, the way she always had. "Dad." She hugged him. She was 46 years old, a high school English teacher in Des Moines. She had Lorraine's eyes and William's quiet intensity. She smelled like coffee and the lavender soap she always used. "I'm fine," Earl said. "Tell me what happened." He told her. The auction notice, the tube, the map. Tom Reedy, Sheriff Iverson, Curtis Dean. Sarah sat at the table, her hands wrapped around a mug of reheated coffee. "And you never opened it?" "Not once in 44 years. "No." "Why not?" "Because Dad told me I didn't have to." She was quiet for a long time. Then she said, "What was Grandpa like? I was only 14 when he died. I don't remember much. He was quiet, like his father. He didn't say much, but when he did, you listened. Did he ever tell you why the south half was so important?" "No, he just said the reason was in the tube." "And you trusted him?" "Yes." Sarah looked down at her coffee. "I don't know if I could have done that, not knowing." It wasn't about knowing, it was about trusting. What if the tube had been empty? What if there was nothing in there? Earl thought about that. Then I would have kept the land anyway, because he asked me to. Sarah reached across the table and put her hand over his. Her hand was warm. "You're a good son, Dad. I'm just trying to do what he would have done. He'd be proud of you." Earl did not answer. He looked out the window at the fields. The sun was lower now, the light beginning to soften. In a few hours it would be dark. Tomorrow the sun would rise again, and the day after that, and the day after that. The land would still be here. The question was whether it would still be his. Sarah stood. "I have to get back. Michael has a basketball game at 7, but I'm coming back this weekend. We'll figure this out." "You don't have to." "Yes, I do." After she left, Earl sat alone in the kitchen. The house was quiet again. He could hear the wind picking up outside, rattling the loose siding on the barn. He thought about Curtis Dean. young, confident, holding a tablet, representing a company Earl had never heard of, trying to sell land he had no right to sell. Earl stood and walked to the window. He looked out at the south fields. The fence line was barely visible in the fading light, a dark line against the pale grass. His father had stood at this window. His grandfather had stood at this window. 3 generations of Bristos looking at the same fields, walking the same ground. Earl Bristow was 74 years old. He was tired. He was alone. He had buried his wife 7 years ago, and he still missed her every morning when he woke up in an empty house. But he was not beaten. Not yet. He picked up his phone and called Tom Reedy. Tom, I need you to find out everything you can about Riverbend Asset Holdings. I'm already on it, Reedy said. I'll call you tomorrow. Earl hung up. He stood at the window until the light was gone and the fields disappeared into darkness. Then he turned and walked slowly up the stairs to the bedroom where he had been born, where he had slept for 68 years, where Lorraine had died in the winter of 2017. He lay down on the bed without undressing. He closed his eyes. He did not sleep. Outside, the wind moved through the bare branches of the oak trees. The land was dark and still waiting. Tom Reedy called at 8:30 the next morning. Earl was already awake. He had been awake since 4. He had made coffee at 5 and had been sitting at the kitchen table ever since, watching the sky lighten through the window. Earl Reedy said, "We need to talk. Can you come to my office?" When? Now. Earl drove to Winterset. The office was above the hardware store on the square, up a narrow staircase that creaked under his boots. The door at the top had a frosted glass window with Thomas J. Reedy, attorney at law, stenciled in black letters. Inside the office was small and crowded with filing cabinets and bookshelves. Reedy was sitting behind a desk covered in papers and open law books. He looked like he had not slept. "Sit down," Reedy said. Earl sat. Reedy picked up a folder. "I spent most of last night digging into Riverbend Asset Holdings. It's a Delaware LLC formed in November 2024. Subsidiary of a larger company called Meridian Land Partners based in Dallas. What do? They call it title arbitrage. They use algorithms to scan county records looking for discrepancies, clerical errors, incomplete filings, properties with unclear ownership. Then they file claims and force auctions. That's legal. Technically, yes. If there's a legitimate title defect, anyone can file a claim. The problem is most of these so-called defects are 70-year-old typos, small errors that were never corrected because nobody had a reason to correct them. Until now. How many farms have they taken?" Reedy opened the folder. "In Madison County alone, 17. You're number 18. Earl felt something cold settle in his chest. 17. 16 of them lost their land before they knew what was happening. Auctions completed, properties sold to developers or agricultural investors. Most of these farmers are elderly Earl, living alone. Some didn't see the legal notices. Some saw them and didn't understand what they meant until it was too late. Do you have names?" Reedy slid a sheet of paper across the desk. "I pulled the auction records from the courthouse." Earl looked at the list. 17 names. He recognized 3 of them. Old neighbors, men he had seen at farm auctions and hardware stores. One of them was Frank Morrison. Frank Morrison lost his farm last year, 80 acres. He was in the hospital with pneumonia. By the time he got out, the land was gone. Earl stared at the name. Frank's wife, Helen, had died 2 years ago. Cancer. Earl had gone to the funeral. Frank had stood at the grave without crying, his face gray and empty. Where is he now? Living with his son in Des Moines. Earl set the paper down. His hands were shaking. Why didn't anyone stop them? Because by the time people realized what was happening, it was already over. These auctions move fast. 3 weeks from filing to sale, and Meridian has lawyers, Earl, good ones. They know exactly how to exploit the system. What about the county? Don't they have a responsibility to verify title? The county records the auction. They don't verify it. That's not their job. It's the seller's responsibility to have clear title. If someone challenges it, that's a civil matter. So they just let it happen. They don't let it happen. They just don't stop it. Earl stood and walked to the window. The hardware store below was opening. A man in a green apron was unlocking the front door. Across the square, the courthouse sat solid and indifferent in the morning sun. What do we do? Earl asked. We file a motion to halt any further proceedings. We get an expert surveyor to verify your 1932 map. We get a forensic document examiner to authenticate the paper and ink. We build a case proving that your family's title is legitimate and Riverbend's claim is fraudulent. How long will that take? Months? Maybe a year? How much will it cost? Reedy was quiet for a moment. 50,000, probably more. Earl turned from the window. I have $47,000 in savings. That's everything, Tom. My whole life. I know. What happens if we lose? Then you lose the land and the 50,000. Earl walked back to the desk. He sat down slowly. His chest hurt. Not sharp, just a dull ache that had been there since yesterday morning when Sarah called. I can't lose that land, Tom. I know you can't, but I can't fight them if I don't have the money. Reedy leaned back in his chair. Earl, let me ask you something. Why is the South half so important? Your father told you not to sell it. But why? What's so special about that land? Earl thought about the question. It was a good question. The South 120 acres was not the best land on the farm. The soil was thinner than the North fields. The pasture was rocky in places. The creek flooded sometimes in the spring. I don't know, Earl said finally. My father didn't tell me. His father didn't tell him. All I know is that 3 generations of Bristows have been told to keep it. And that's enough. Yes, Reedy nodded. Then let's keep it. Even if it costs everything I have. Even then. Earl stood. All right, do what you need to do. Reedy stood and held out his hand. Earl shook it. One more thing, Reedy said. I'm going to ask Ralph Iverson to open an investigation. This isn't just civil fraud. If Meridian is systematically targeting vulnerable property owners, that might be criminal. Will that help us? I don't know, but it can't hurt. Earl left the office and drove home. On the way, he stopped at the bank. He withdrew $20,000 from his savings account. The teller, a young woman named Jessica, who had been in Sarah's class in high school, counted the bills twice and asked if everything was okay. Everything's fine, Earl said. At home, he wrote a check to Thomas J. Reedy for $20,000. He put the check in an envelope. He would mail it tomorrow. Then he sat at the kitchen table and opened his laptop. Lorraine had bought the laptop in 2015, insisting he needed to keep up with the times. He mostly used it to check weather forecasts and grain prices. Now he typed Meridian Land Partners into the search bar. The company website loaded, clean professional corporate, a photo of a glass office building in Dallas, a mission statement about innovative solutions in agricultural real estate. Earl clicked on the About page. There was a photo of the executive team, 5 people in suits standing in front of the same glass building. The CEO was a man named Richard Vance, 52 MBA from Stanford. Earl clicked on the services page. The language was dense with jargon, title arbitrage, strategic acquisition of distressed assets, maximizing value through regulatory expertise. He closed the laptop. This was not farming. This was not even business. This was something else, something cold and mechanical and distant. Curtis Dean, Richard Vance, Meridian Land Partners. They had never walked the South Fields. They had never stood at the corner post and felt the wind coming up from the creek. They had never planted a fence or mended a gate or pulled a calf in the middle of a January night. They did not care about the land. They cared about the profit. Earl stood and walked outside. The air was cold and clean. The sky was blue. He walked across the gravel drive to the barn. Inside, his old tractor sat silent, the one he had sold yesterday to a neighbor for $8,000. The space where it had been looked empty. He walked past the barn to the fence line. He followed the fence west toward the south fields. His boots crunched on the frozen grass. His breath came in short white clouds. At the southwest corner, he stopped. The corner post was thick and weathered, sunk deep into the ground. His grandfather, Henry, had set this post in 1929. The wire had been replaced 4 times, but the post was the same post. Earl put his hand on it. The wood was cold and rough. "I'm not letting them take it, Grandpa," he said to the empty field. "I don't care what it costs." The wind picked up. The grass bent and rustled. In the distance, a crow called once and then was silent. Earl stood at the post for a long time. Then he turned and walked back to the house. That night he could not sleep. He lay in bed staring at the ceiling. His chest hurt. The ache had not gone away. If anything, it was worse. At 2 in the morning, he got up and went downstairs. He poured a glass of water and sat at the kitchen table. The house was dark and still. Outside, the moon was half full, casting pale light across the fields. He thought about Lorraine. If she were here, what would she say? She would say, "Earl Bristow, you're the stubbornest man in Iowa, and that land is going to kill you." And then she would say, "But you're doing the right thing." He missed her. He missed her every day, but tonight he missed her in a way that felt like drowning. She had been the steady one, the practical one. She had kept the books and made the decisions and told him when he was being too stubborn or too proud. Without her, he felt unmoored. He picked up his phone. He called Sarah. She answered on the 4th ring, her voice thick with sleep. "Dad, it's 2 in the morning. I know, I'm sorry. Are you okay?" "I don't know." There was a pause. He heard rustling, a door closing. Then Sarah's voice again, clearer now. "What's wrong?" "I'm tired, Sarah. I'm tired and I don't know if I can do this." "Dad, your mother would know what to do. She always knew what to do." "Dad, listen to me. You're doing what Mom would do. You're fighting." "I'm 74 years old. I'm fighting a company with unlimited money and lawyers who do this for a living. What if I lose? What if I spend everything I have and I lose anyway?" Sarah was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "Do you remember what you told me when I was in college? I wanted to drop out. I was failing chemistry and I thought I couldn't do it. Do you remember what you said?" "No." "You said, 'Sarah, sometimes you do hard things not because you know you'll win, but because you can't live with yourself if you don't try." Earl closed his eyes. "This is that, Dad. This is your hard thing, and you have to try it even if you lose." "I'm scared," Earl said. It was the first time he had said it out loud. "I know, but you're not alone. I'm here. Tom Reedy is here. We're all here." After they hung up, Earl sat in the dark kitchen for another hour. Then he went back upstairs and lay down. This time he slept. 3 days later, Tom Reedy called again. "Earl, we have a hearing tomorrow. Riverbend is filing a motion to proceed with the auction. We need to be ready." "I'll be there. Bring the map and whatever other documents you have." The hearing was in the Madison County Courthouse in a small courtroom on the 2nd floor. Judge Patricia Hendricks presiding. She was 59 with short gray hair and a reputation for fairness. Earl sat at the plaintiff's table with Tom Reedy. Across the aisle, Curtis Dean sat with a lawyer from Chicago named Daniel Kraus. Kraus was 48 expensive suit briefcase that probably cost more than Earl's truck. Judge Hendricks entered. Everyone stood. She sat. Everyone sat. "This is the matter of Riverbend Asset Holdings versus Bristow," she said. "Mr. Kraus, you filed the motion. Proceed." Kraus stood. "Your Honor, this is a straightforward case. My client has a valid claim based on recorded county title. Mr. Bristow has presented a map allegedly from 1932, but that map has not been authenticated. Furthermore, even if authentic, it does not override 70 years of recorded title. We are asking the court to allow the auction to proceed as scheduled." Judge Hendricks looked at Reedy. "Mr. Reedy," Reedy stood. "Your Honor, the 1932 map was drawn by J.R. Whitlock, a licensed county surveyor. It predates the 1956 clerical error by 24 years. We have arranged for expert authentication and surveying testimony. We are asking the court to halt all proceedings until we can demonstrate that Mr. Bristow's title is legitimate and Riverbend's claim is fraudulent. Do you have proof of fraud? We are gathering evidence, Your Honor. That's not an answer, Mr. Reedy. No, Your Honor. But if you allow this auction to proceed, Mr. Bristow will lose his land before we have a chance to prove his case. Judge Hendricks leaned back in her chair. She looked at Earl. Mr. Bristow, how long have you owned this property? Earl stood. His legs felt weak. I've owned it since 1981, Your Honor. 44 years. And before that, my father owned it, and before him, my grandfather. Have you paid taxes on it? Every year. Never missed. Has there ever been any dispute about the boundaries? No, Your Honor. Not until last week. She nodded. Sit down, Mr. Bristow. He sat. Judge Hendricks looked at Krause. Mr. Krause, I'm inclined to give Mr. Bristow time to present his evidence. This is not a small matter. If there is a legitimate title dispute, it should be resolved properly. Your Honor, Krause said, my client has been more than patient. This map conveniently appears at the last moment. We believe Mr. Bristow is stalling. Stalling, Reedy stood. Your Honor, my client had no reason to examine his family records until Riverbend tried to steal his land. Mr. Reedy, the judge said, I'll thank you to avoid inflammatory language in my courtroom. My apologies, Your Honor. She was quiet for a long moment. Then she said, motion to proceed with auction is denied. Mr. Reedy, you have 90 days to present your case. If you can prove Mr. Bristow's title is valid, we'll proceed from there. If not, the auction will go forward. Do you understand? Yes, Your Honor. Mr. Krause looked unhappy. Understood, Your Honor. Good. This hearing is adjourned. The gavel came down. Outside the courtroom, Reedy put a hand on Earl's shoulder. That was a good start, but now we have to deliver. 90 days, Earl said. 90 days. Earl drove home. He felt lighter than he had in days, but also heavier. The fight was not over. It was just beginning. That night, he called Sarah. We have 90 days, he said. That's good, Dad. I don't know if it's enough. It'll have to be. The next week, Earl wrote another check to Tom Reedy, $15,000. His savings account balance was now $12,000. He tried not to think about it. A surveyor came to the farm. Her name was Janet Kowalski, 52, no-nonsense, with a reputation for precision. She spent 3 days surveying the south 120 acres. She measured. She calculated. She walked the fence line with a GPS unit and a notebook. On the 4th day, she came to the house. Earl made coffee. They sat at the kitchen table. Mr. Bristow, she said, your 1932 map is accurate. I've verified it against modern surveying standards. The boundaries match exactly. Whoever drew that map knew what they were doing. J.R. Whitlock. Good surveyor. His work is all over this county. So the current county records are wrong. Yes, the error was introduced sometime after 1932. Based on the documents I've reviewed, I'd say 1956. Earl nodded. That's when my father inherited the farm. Someone in the county recorder's office made a mistake. Or, she paused. Or what? Or someone made it deliberately. Earl stared at her. Why would anyone do that? I don't know, but the error is too clean, too precise. It's not the kind of mistake you make by accident. After she left, Earl sat alone in the kitchen. The house was quiet. Outside, the sun was setting, painting the fields gold and orange. Someone made it deliberately. He thought about that. Who would have done it, and why his father had never mentioned any dispute. His grandfather had never mentioned one either. As far as Earl knew, the Bristow title had been clear for 97 years, unless it hadn't been. Earl stood and went to the filing cabinet. He pulled out the 1956 inheritance papers. He read through them slowly, looking for anything unusual. The transfer had been processed by the Madison County Recorder's Office. The clerk who had signed the paperwork was someone named Margaret Holloway. Earl had never heard of Margaret Holloway. He called Tom Reedy. Tom, do you know anyone named Margaret Holloway? She was a county clerk in 1956. Holloway, Reedy said. Let me check. There was a pause. Earl could hear typing. Margaret Holloway, Reedy said, worked in the recorder's office from 1954 to 1959. Died in 1989. Can you find out anything else about her? What are you thinking? Janet Kowalski thinks the 1956 error might have been deliberate. Reedy was quiet. I'll dig into it. 2 days later, Reedy called back. Earl, I think we found something. What? Margaret Holloway processed 37 inheritance transfers between 1954 and 1959. I pulled the records. 7 of them have the same kind of clerical error as your father's. Small discrepancies in the legal descriptions. All of them on properties over 80 acres. Earl felt his pulse quicken. 7, so. 7, including 3 properties that Riverbend has already auctioned. What does that mean? It means this wasn't random. Someone was altering records systematically. And 70 years later, Meridian Land Partners is profiting from it. Earl sat down slowly. Jesus Christ. This changes everything, Earl. If we can prove this was deliberate, Riverbend's entire operation in Madison County is fraudulent. How do we prove it? I don't know yet, but I'm working on it. That night, Earl couldn't sleep again. But this time it wasn't fear, it was anger. Someone had altered his family's records in 1956. Someone had planted a bomb that had sat waiting for 70 years. And now Meridian Land Partners had found it and was using it to steal land from people who had done nothing wrong. He thought about Frank Morrison, about the other names on that list. 17 families. How many of them had lost farms that had been in their families for generations? Earl stood and walked to the window. The fields were dark, the moon was gone, but he could still see the fence line, a thin shadow against the sky. He was not just fighting for himself anymore. He was fighting for all of them. The next morning, he called Tom Reedy. Tom, I want to visit Frank Morrison. Why? Because he deserves to know what happened to him. Reedy was quiet for a moment. All right, I'll get you his address. Frank Morrison lived in a small apartment in Des Moines on the 2nd floor of a building near the interstate. Earl drove there on a Sunday afternoon. He climbed the stairs slowly, his chest aching. Frank opened the door. He was 68, thin, with gray hair and eyes that looked tired. Earl Bristow, Frank said. I'll be damned. They sat in the small living room. The place was crowded with furniture that looked like it had come from a much larger house. A farmhouse, Frank's grandson's toys were scattered on the floor. From the kitchen came the sound of a woman's voice and a child laughing. I heard about your trouble, Frank said. The auction. I stopped it. For now. Good. Don't let them take it. Frank, I need to ask you something. When you lost your farm, did anyone explain how it happened? Frank's face darkened. They said there was a problem with the title, an old lien or something. I didn't understand it. They sent legal papers. I was in the hospital with pneumonia. By the time I got out and read them, the auction was done. Land was sold. Who bought it? Some developer, building condos there now. Frank looked away. My father built that house in 1947. I was born there. Helen and I raised our kids there, and now it's gone. 80 acres, 5 generations, gone in 3 weeks. Earl leaned forward. Frank, it wasn't your fault. They targeted you. They target elderly farmers living alone. They find old clerical errors in the county records and use them to force auctions. You couldn't have stopped it. Frank looked at him. You're saying they did this on purpose? Yes. How many others? 17 in Madison County alone. Frank stood abruptly. He walked to the window. His hands were shaking. Those sons of bitches. I'm going to stop them, Frank, not just for me, for all of us. Frank turned. His eyes were wet. Can you get my land back? I don't know. but I'm going to try. They talked for another hour. Earl told him about the 1932 map, about Janet Kowalski's survey, about Margaret Holloway and the systematic alteration of records. When Earl left, Frank walked him to the door. Earl, Frank said, Helen died 2 years ago, cancer. We were married 46 years. When she was gone, I didn't know what to do with myself. The farm was all I had left, and then they took that too. He paused. If you beat them, you're not just saving your land, you're saving a part of me. You understand? Earl understood. He drove home in silence. The sun was setting. The fields along the highway were bare and brown, waiting for spring. When he got home, he called Sarah. I went to see Frank Morrison today. How is he? He's broken, Sarah. They broke him. Dad, I have to win this. Not for me, for him, for all of them. You will, Dad. I believe that. I hope you're right. That night, alone in the dark house, Earl Bristow made a promise to himself. He would fight Meridian Land Partners with everything he had, every dollar, every ounce of strength. If he lost, he would lose everything. But he would not stop fighting. Not until the land was safe. Not until the line held. The email arrived on a Tuesday evening in March. Earl was at the kitchen table reviewing invoices from Janet Kowalski. The surveying work had cost $11,000. The forensic document analysis had cost another $8,000. His savings account was down to $6,000. His phone buzzed. An email from Tom Reedy, subject line, "You need to see this." Earl opened it. Attached was a PDF. The email said only, "Came from anonymous source. Verifying authenticity now. This changes everything. Call me." Earl downloaded the PDF. It was 47 pages long. Internal documents from Meridian Land Partners. Emails, spreadsheets, target lists. He read. The first document was an email from Curtis Dean to Richard Vance, CEO, dated November 3rd, 2024. Attached is updated target list for Iowa Q1, 847 properties flagged across 12 counties. Selection criteria: elderly owners, 70-plus living alone properties, 80-plus acres, inheritance records pre-1960. Total estimated acquisition value, $340 million. Projected margin, 28 to 32% after legal costs and resale. Earl felt his hands go numb. 847 property. He kept reading. Another email, this one from someone named Jennifer Pauls, VP of Acquisitions. Curtis, remind your team to move quickly on auctions. These old farmers get emotional about land. Once they understand what's happening, they fight. We need completed sales before family members intervene. Another email, Curtis Dean again. Per your request, we've identified 18 priority targets in Madison County. All fit profile, elderly, widowed, no close family inheritance records with clerical errors. Estimated total value, $8.2 million. Plan to complete all auctions by end of Q1. Earl scrolled to the next document. A spreadsheet, names, addresses, property descriptions, estimated values. Frank Morrison was on the list. Targeted February 12th, 2024. Status completed. Sale price, $620,000. Resale price, $890,000. Margin, $270,000. 11 other names Earl recognized. All marked completed. And then near the bottom, Earl Bristow. Targeted March 4th, 2025. Status pending. Earl set down the phone. His chest hurt. The ache had become something sharper now. Something that made it hard to breathe. He called Tom Reedy. Reedy answered immediately. You got it. I got it. Earl, this is exactly what we needed. This proves systematic fraud. If we can verify these documents are real, Riverbend's entire operation collapses. How do we verify them? I've already contacted a digital forensics expert. She's analyzing the metadata, the email headers, everything. Should have preliminary results tomorrow. Who sent this? I don't know. The email came from a Proton Mail account routed through a VPN. Whoever it is, they're being careful. Someone inside Meridian. That would be my guess. Someone with a conscience. After they hung up, Earl sat alone in the dark kitchen. Outside, the wind was moving through the bare trees. Spring was coming, but slowly. He thought about 847 properties, 847 families. How many of them were like Frank Morrison? How many had lost land that had been in their families for generations? Meridian Land Partners was not just stealing land. They were erasing history. The next day, Reedy's forensic expert confirmed the documents were authentic. The emails were real. The spreadsheets were real. All of it was real. This is admissible, Reedy told Earl over the phone. We can use this in court. When the trial is set for May 15th, 6 weeks from now. 6 weeks. Earl looked at his calendar. May 15th was circled in red. Below it in Lorraine's handwriting from years ago were the words, "Plant corn Southfield." May 15th was planting season. If Earl was in court, he would not be planting. And if he lost, there would be no point in planting at all. In April, Earl developed chest pain that would not go away. It was constant now, a dull pressure behind his sternum that got worse when he moved or breathed deeply. Sarah noticed. She had been coming to the farm every weekend, helping him with paperwork, making sure he ate, trying to get him to rest. Dad, you need to see a doctor. I'm fine. You're not fine. You're gray, you're exhausted, and you keep rubbing your chest. It's just stress. Exactly. Stress that could kill you. She made him an appointment. He went reluctantly. The doctor was young, maybe 35, with kind eyes and a serious expression. Mr. Bristow, your blood pressure is 168 over 102. Your EKG shows irregularities. You're showing signs of cardiac strain. What does that mean? It means the stress you're under is damaging your heart. If you don't reduce it, you're at risk for a heart attack. I can't reduce it. Not right now. The doctor leaned forward. Mr. Bristow, I understand you're in the middle of a legal battle. But is it worth your life? Earl thought about Frank Morrison, about the 847 properties, about Henry and William in the Southfields. Yes, Earl said, it is. The doctor prescribed medication, beta blockers, blood pressure pills. He told Earl to avoid stress, get more sleep, eat better. Earl took the pills. He did not avoid stress. He did not sleep. He ate when Sarah forced him to. On April 28, 17 days before the trial, Earl woke at 3 in the morning with severe chest pain. It was different this time. Sharp, radiating down his left arm. He tried to stand. His legs gave out. He fell to the floor beside the bed. He managed to reach his phone. He called Sarah. Dad, her voice was thick with sleep. Sarah, his voice came out in a whisper. I need help. Dad, what's wrong? Chest pain, can't breathe. I'm calling 911. Don't move. I'm on my way. The ambulance arrived in 14 minutes. The paramedics were young and efficient. They put him on a stretcher, started an IV, hooked him to monitors. Earl watched the ceiling of his bedroom pass by, then the hallway, then the front door. Outside, the sky was black. The stars were sharp and cold. Earl could see the outline of the barn, the fence line, the fields beyond. If he died now, he would die without knowing if the land was safe. At the hospital, they ran tests. EKG blood work, chest x-ray. A doctor came to his room, not the young one from before. This one was older, maybe 60, with gray hair and a face that had seen a lot of suffering. Mr. Bristow, you had a cardiac event. Not a full heart attack, but you were close. Another hour, maybe less. Sarah was standing beside the bed. Her face was pale. Is he going to be okay? For now. But Mr. Bristow, I need to be very clear with you. The stress you're under is literally killing you. Your heart cannot sustain this. You need to stop whatever you're doing and rest. I can't. Then you will die. It's that simple. Sarah took his hand. Dad, please. Earl looked at her. She was crying. When had she started crying, Sarah? He said. His voice was weak. I can't stop. You know I can't. Why is this land more important than your life? It's not about the land. It's about what it means. What does it mean? He struggled to find the words. It means when your grandfather handed me that tube, he trusted me, and his father trusted him, and I can't break that trust. I can't be the one who fails. Dad, Mom wouldn't want this. Your mother would understand. He closed his eyes. He was so tired, more tired than he had ever been. When he opened them again, Sarah was still there. The room was darker. A nurse was checking his IV. How long have I been asleep? 4 hours, Sarah said. It's 7 in the morning. I need to call Tom Reedy. Dad, I need to call him Sarah. She handed him his phone. Reedy answered on the first ring. Earl, I heard. How are you? I'm alive. What's happening with the trial? Trial is still on. May 15th. But Earl, if you're in the hospital, I'll be there. Earl, I'll be there, Tom. He hung up. Sarah was staring at him. Dad, you heard what the doctor said. I heard him. And you're still going to do this? Yes. She sat down in the chair beside the bed. She was quiet for a long time. Then she said, tell me about Grandpa William, not the farm stuff. Tell me what he was like as a father. Earl thought back. William Bristow had been a quiet man. He had shown love through work, through teaching, through presence. He had never said, I love you out loud. He had never needed to. He was steady, Earl said. No matter what happened, he was steady. During the drought in '76, when we lost half the crop, he didn't panic. When your grandmother died in '54, he grieved, but he kept working. He just kept going. Like you, I suppose. Do you remember when he gave you the farm? Yes. What did you feel? Scared, honored, overwhelmed. Did you ever think about walking away, selling it, and doing something else? No, never. Why not? Earl looked at the ceiling. The tiles were white and stained. Because it wasn't mine to walk away from. It belonged to everyone who came before me, and everyone who will come after. Sarah squeezed his hand. You're a good man, Dad. I'm a stubborn man. Those can be the same thing. He was in the hospital for 3 days. The doctors wanted him to stay longer, but he checked himself out. Sarah drove him home. She had taken the week off work. She stayed with him, sleeping in the guest room, cooking meals he barely touched. On May 10th, 5 days before the trial, Tom Reedy came to the house. Earl, we need to prep you for testimony. They sat at the kitchen table. Reedy had a yellow legal pad covered in notes. The trial will last 2 days, maybe 3. Judge Hendricks is fair, but she won't tolerate theatrics. We present our case first. Expert testimony from Janet Kowalski, the forensic document examiner, and a title historian I've hired. Then you testify. What will they ask me? Kraus will try to discredit you. He'll ask why you never opened the tube. He'll ask if you fabricated the map. He'll try to make you look like you're making this up. But I'm not. I know that. You know that. But the judge needs to see it. They practiced for 3 hours. Reedy played the role of Kraus, asking harsh questions. Earl answered as best he could. By the end, he was exhausted. You'll do fine, Reedy said. Just tell the truth. That's all I know how to do. The night before the trial, Earl could not sleep. He lay in bed staring at the ceiling, thinking about the past 97 years. Henry breaking the saw. William farming through war and depression. Lorraine in the kitchen making dinner, laughing at something Earl had said. All of it led to this moment, this courtroom, this trial. If he won, the land stayed in the family. The line held. If he lost, everything was gone. At 4 in the morning, he gave up trying to sleep. He went downstairs and made coffee. He sat at the kitchen table and watched the sky lighten. Sarah came down at 6. She looked like she had not slept either. Ready? She asked. No, me neither. They drove to Winterset together. The courthouse steps were crowded. Earl recognized faces from town, farmers he had known for decades, neighbors, friends. Frank Morrison was there standing near the back wearing a suit that looked too big for him. Inside the courtroom was already full. Earl sat at the plaintiff's table beside Tom Reedy. Across the aisle, Curtis Dean sat with Daniel Kraus. Kraus was reading something on his tablet, his face expressionless. Judge Patricia Hendricks entered at 9 o'clock sharp. Everyone stood, she sat, everyone sat. This is the matter of Earl Bristow versus Riverbend Asset Holdings, she said. Mr. Reedy, you may present your case. Reedy stood. Your Honor, this case is about truth. The truth about who owns the south 120 acres of the Bristow property. The truth about how Meridian Land Partners has systematically defrauded elderly farmers across Iowa. And the truth about what happens when corporate greed meets family legacy. Kraus objected immediately. Your Honor, counsel is making speeches, not presenting facts. Sustained. Mr. Reedy, stick to the facts. Yes, Your Honor. The first witness was Janet Kowalski. She testified about the survey, about the 1932 map, about the accuracy of J.R. Whitlock's work. She was calm, professional, unshakable. Kraus cross-examined. Ms. Kowalski, is it possible Mr. Bristow fabricated this map recently? No, the paper and ink have been tested. They are consistent with 1932. But could someone fake that? Theoretically, yes, but it would require significant expertise and resources. And there would be forensic markers. We found none. The second witness was Dr. Paul Fisher, the forensic document examiner. He testified about the paper, the ink, the technique. Everything pointed to 1932. Kraus tried to poke holes. Fisher did not budge. The third witness was a title historian from Iowa State University. She testified about clerical errors in county records, about Margaret Holloway, about the pattern of altered documents. By the end of the first day, Reedy had presented a compelling case. Earl could see it in Judge Hendricks' face. She was listening. She was taking notes. That night, Earl barely ate. Sarah sat with him at the kitchen table. You did good today, Dad. I didn't do anything. You were there. That's enough. The next morning, Earl testified. Reedy questioned him first. Simple questions. How long have you owned the land? Who owned it before you? Have you paid taxes? Earl answered each one calmly, clearly. Then Kraus stood. Mr. Bristow, you claim you kept that cardboard tube sealed for 44 years. Yes. That's absurd. No, sir, that's trust. Kraus paused. You expect this court to believe you never once looked inside, yes. Why? Because my father told me I didn't need to. And you just believed him. Yes, Kraus walked closer. Mr. Bristow, isn't it convenient that this map appears now just when you need it? I've needed it since 1981. I just didn't know I needed it until last month. Or you made it last month? No, sir. You could have opened that tube at any time, read the map, used it to challenge county records. But you didn't. Why? Earl thought about the question. It was a good question. He had asked it himself many times. Because, he said slowly, my father trusted me not to need it, and I trusted him to know what was right. That's not a rational decision, Mr. Bristow. No, sir, it's a faithful one. There was a murmur in the courtroom. Judge Hendricks looked at Earl for a long moment. Then she looked at Kraus. Mr. Kraus, do you have further questions? Kraus hesitated. Then he said, No, Your Honor. Then the witness is excused. Earl stood. His legs were shaking. He walked back to the table and sat beside Reedy. Reedy leaned over. You did great. I didn't do anything. You told the truth. That's everything. The courtroom door opened during the recess. Reedy stood and whispered to Earl, I need to show the judge something. Court resumed. Reedy stood. Your Honor, I have new evidence I'd like to present. Kraus objected immediately. Your Honor, Mr. Reddy failed to disclose this evidence during discovery. Your Honor, Reedy said, we received these documents 3 weeks ago from an anonymous source. We have verified their authenticity. They are internal communications from Meridian Land Partners proving systematic fraud. Judge Hendricks frowned. Approach the bench. Reedy and Krause walked to the bench. There was a whispered conference. Earl could not hear what was said, but he could see Judge Hendricks' face. She looked angry. She waved them back. I'm going to allow the evidence, she said, but I'm not pleased about the timing, Mr. Reedy. Understood, Your Honor. Reedy presented the documents, the emails, the spreadsheets, the target lists. The courtroom went silent. Krause tried to object to argue that the documents were obtained illegally, that they were taken out of context, but Judge Hendricks cut him off. Mr. Krause, these documents speak for themselves. She read through them slowly. When she finished, she set them down and looked at Curtis Dane, who was sitting pale and rigid at the defense table. Mr. Dane, she said, I'd like to ask you some questions. Dane stood. He looked like he was going to be sick. Mr. Dane, did you write these emails? A long pause, then quietly, yes, Your Honor. And these target lists 847 properties across Iowa. Yes. And you specifically targeted elderly farmers, living alone, vulnerable. We identified properties with title discrepancies. That's not what I asked. Did you target vulnerable farmers? Dane did not answer. Mr. Dane, I'm going to refer this matter to the Iowa Attorney General. I'm also ruling in favor of Mr. Bristow. His title is legitimate. Riverbend's claim is dismissed with prejudice. Do you understand what that means? Yes, Your Honor. It means you're done, not just in this case, in this state. The gavel came down. The courtroom erupted. People were standing talking, some of them applauding. Earl sat frozen. He could not move. He could not breathe. Sarah was hugging him. Reedy was shaking his hand. Frank Morrison was standing in the aisle, tears running down his face. Earl Bristow had won. 2 weeks later, Meridian Land Partners offered a settlement. $1.1 million in damages, plus attorney fees, plus a permanent injunction preventing them from operating in Iowa. They also agreed to settle with the 16 other farmers who had lost their land. Earl signed the settlement papers in Tom Reedy's office. What will you do with the money? Reedy asked. Put half in a fund for Sarah's boys. Use the other half to help Frank and the others. Earl, you could retire. You could rest. I'll rest when I'm dead. That summer, Earl walked the south fence line with Sarah. It was a Sunday afternoon in June. The sky was blue, the fields were green, the corn was knee-high. They walked slowly, not talking, just walking. At the southwest corner, they stopped. Earl put his hand on the corner post, the same post Henry had set in 1929. Grandpa set this, Sarah asked. Yes. And it's still here. Yes. She put her hand on the post beside his. I'm going to tell Michael and Daniel about the tube. When they're older, when they were ready. What will you tell them? That trust is the inheritance that matters most. Earl looked out at the fields. The land rolled away to the south, green and alive under the summer sun. 3 generations of Bristows had walked this ground, 4 counting Sarah, 5 counting her boys. Some things last, he said. Yes, Sarah said. Some things do. They turned and walked back along the fence line. The sun was lowering. The shadows were long. Behind them, the corner post stood solid and unmoved, holding the line the way it had held the line for 96 years. When they reached the house, Earl went inside. He climbed the stairs slowly. His chest still hurt sometimes, but less now. The medication helped. The rest helped more. In the sewing room, he opened the closet. He pulled down a new cardboard tube. Inside was a copy of the 1932 map, a copy of the court verdict, and a letter he had written to Michael and Daniel. The letter said, "To my grandsons, your great-great-grandfather, Henry, broke this land with his hands. Your great-grandfather William kept it through depression and war. I kept it through my own battles. Now it's your mother's, and one day it will be yours. In this tube is a map. It's the true line of our land, but more important than the map is what it represents. The truth doesn't change just because someone writes something different down. Stand for truth even when it's hard, especially when it's hard. I never opened this tube for 44 years. I didn't need to. I trusted my father and he trusted his. That trust is your inheritance. The land will pass to you. The money will pass to you. But the trust, that's what makes you a Bristow. Your grandfather Earl, he sealed the tube. He would give it to Sarah when the time was right. She would know when. That night, Earl sat at the kitchen table. The house was quiet. Outside, the stars were bright. The fields were dark and still. He thought about Henry, about William, about Lorraine, about all the people who had walked this ground before him and all the people who would walk it after. Some inheritances are money, some are land. The rarest and most valuable is the instruction, the single sentence passed from one generation to the next, kept on faith for 90 years without question. Earl Bristow was 74 years old. He had lived in this house for 68 of those years. He had fought for it. He had almost died for it. And he had won. The line had held. Prepare for a fight to win, Sarah noticed. She had been coming to the farm every weekend, staying overnight in her old bedroom, helping him with paperwork, cooking meals he barely touched. She watched him rub his chest when he thought she wasn't looking. She watched him climb the stairs, slowly stopping halfway to catch his breath. Dad, you need to see a doctor. I'm fine. You're not fine. You're pale. You're exhausted. You keep rubbing your chest like it hurts. It's just stress. Exactly. Stress that's going to kill you. Dad, please, let me make you an appointment. After the trial. Dad, after the trial, Sarah, I can't deal with doctors right now. I don't have time. But she made the appointment anyway. She called his doctor, Dr. Raymond, and told him what was happening. Dr. Raymond said to bring Earl in immediately. Sarah drove Earl to the clinic in Winterset, practically forcing him into the car. Dr. Raymond was young, maybe 35, with kind eyes and a serious expression. He had taken over the practice from old Dr. Henshaw 3 years ago when Henshaw retired. He listened to Earl's heart. He took his blood pressure. He ran an EKG. He drew blood. When the test came back, his expression was grave. Mr. Bristow, your blood pressure is 168/102. That's dangerously high. Your EKG shows irregularities consistent with cardiac strain. Your blood work shows elevated troponin levels, which suggest your heart muscle is being damaged. What does that mean? It means the stress you're under is literally damaging your heart. You're at significant risk for a heart attack, maybe within days or weeks if things don't change. I'm in the middle of a legal battle. I can't stop now. Dr. Raymond leaned forward, his elbows on his knees. Mr. Bristow, I understand you're dealing with something important, but is it more important than your life? Earl thought about Frank Morrison's face when he talked about losing his farm, about the 847 properties on that spreadsheet, about 3 generations of Bristows who had kept the land, about promises made and trust given. Yes, Earl said, it is. Dr. Raymond sat back. He looked frustrated, but also resigned, like he had seen this before. Stubborn patients who wouldn't listen. Then at least let me prescribe medication. Beta blockers to lower your blood pressure. Aspirin to reduce your risk of heart attack. You need to take these every day, no exceptions. All right, and you need to rest, sleep, eat properly, avoid stress as much as possible. I'll try. Mr. Bristow, I'm not kidding. You're 74 years old. Your heart can only take so much. If you keep pushing like this, you're going to die. It's not a possibility, it's a certainty. Sarah drove Earl home in silence. When they got there, she sat him down at the kitchen table. Dad, the doctor's right. You need to slow down. I can't. Why not Tom Reedy can handle the trial? You don't have to do everything yourself. It's my land, Sarah, my fight. And you'll be dead before the trial if you keep this up. Then what? Then I inherit the land and the legal bills and the mess. Is that what you want? Earl looked at her, really looked at her. She had her mother's eyes, Lorraine's eyes, green with gold flecks. And she had the same expression Lorraine used to get when she was worried and angry at the same time. The expression that meant she was not going to back down. No, he said quietly, that's not what I want. Then take care of yourself, please. For me, for Mum, for Michael and Daniel. We need you alive, Dad. Earl nodded. Also, I'll take the medication. I'll rest. I'll try. But 3 nights later, on April 28th, Earl woke at 3 in the morning with severe chest pain. It was different this time. Sharp, radiating down his left arm and up into his jaw. He could not catch his breath. The room spun. He tried to stand. His legs gave out. He fell to the floor beside the bed, his shoulder hitting the nightstand, knocking the lamp over. The lamp crashed to the floor. The bulb shattered. He managed to reach his phone. He called Sarah. His fingers were clumsy, slow. It took 3 tries to dial. Dad, her voice was thick with sleep and then suddenly alert. Dad, what's wrong? Sarah. His voice came out in a whisper. I need help. What's happening? Chest pain, can't breathe, hurts. Oh God. Dad, I'm calling 911 right now. Don't move, just stay on the line with me. I'm calling them on my other phone. Can you hear me? Yes. Help is coming. Just hold on. Please hold on. Earl lay on the floor. The room was dark except for the moonlight coming through the window. He could see the ceiling, the same ceiling he had looked at for 68 years, the same cracks in the plaster, the same water stain from the roof leak. He thought about Lorraine, about her last day lying in the hospital bed in the living room looking out at the fields, about the promise he had made. He thought about the south fields, the corner post, the fence line, the land rolling away toward the creek. He thought about Henry breaking the sod, about William keeping the promise, about the tube sealed for 44 years. He had fought. He had done everything he could. If this was the end, at least he had fought. The ambulance arrived in 14 minutes. Sarah had said they were coming from Winterset 15 miles away. 14 minutes felt like hours. The paramedics were young and efficient, a man and a woman, both maybe 30. They came up the stairs quickly carrying equipment. They knelt beside Earl. They asked questions. He tried to answer, but the words would not come. They put him on a stretcher, started an IV, hooked him to monitors. Earl watched the ceiling of his bedroom pass by, then the hallway ceiling, then the front door. Outside, the sky was black. The stars were sharp and cold and infinite. Earl could see the outline of the barn, the fence line, the fields beyond. The land looked peaceful, unchanging, eternal. If he died now, he would die without knowing if it was safe, without knowing if the line held. At the hospital in Des Moines, they ran tests: EKG, blood work, chest X-ray, echocardiogram. Earl drifted in and out of consciousness. He saw doctors, nurses, bright lights. He heard machines beeping, voices talking about troponin levels and ST elevation and cardiac catheterization. When he woke up, he was in a hospital room. White walls, white sheets, a window showing gray dawn light. Sarah was sitting in a chair beside the bed, her head resting on the edge of his mattress as asleep. A doctor came in, not Dr. Raymond. This one was older, maybe 60, with gray hair and a tired face. His name tag said Dr. Mitchell Brennan, Cardiology. Mr. Bristow, you had a cardiac event, what we call an NST-EMI, non-ST elevation myocardial infarction, a type of heart attack. Not as severe as some, but serious. Another hour without treatment, and you might not have made it. Sarah lifted her head. Her face was pale, streaked with tears. Is he going to be okay? She asked. Dr. Brennan looked at Earl, then at Sarah. That depends on him. Mr. Bristow, your heart has been under tremendous stress. The damage we're seeing is consistent with prolonged severe stress. Your daughter tells me you're involved in a legal battle over property. Yes, Mr. Bristow, I need to be very clear with you. The stress you're under is literally killing you. Your heart cannot sustain this level of pressure. You need to stop whatever you're doing and rest. Complete rest. No stress, no worry, no court appearances. I have a trial in 2 weeks. Then you need to postpone it or have your lawyer handle it without you. Because if you continue on this path, you will have another heart attack. And next time you might not survive. Sarah took his hand. Her hand was warm. He could feel her shaking. Dad, please, please listen to him. Earl looked at her. She was crying again and silently, tears running down her face. Dad, I can't lose you. Not now. Not like this. Please. Earl closed his eyes. He felt so tired. More tired than he had ever been. His chest hurt. His arm hurt. Everything hurt. Sarah, he said. His voice was weak. I can't stop. You know I can't. Why is this land more important than your life, than your grandson's? It's not about the land. It's about what it means. What does it mean? He struggled to find the words. His mind was foggy, whether from the heart attack or the medication or just exhaustion. It means when your grandfather handed me that tube, he trusted me, and his father trusted him. 3 generations of trust, and I can't break that trust. I can't be the one who fails. You're not failing, Dad. You're dying. Then I'll die fighting, but I won't quit. Dr. Brennan shook his head. Mr. Bristow, I've seen a lot of stubborn patients over 30 years, but you might be the most stubborn. Against my strong medical advice, I'm going to discharge you in 2 days if your condition stabilizes. But you need to understand you are on borrowed time. Any significant stress could trigger another event. And next time I might not be able to save you. Earl stayed in the hospital for 3 days. They kept him on monitors. They adjusted his medications. They ran more tests. Sarah stayed with him the whole time, sleeping in the chair, leaving only to call her school and arrange for a substitute teacher. On the 3rd day, Sarah's sons came to visit. Michael and Daniel, 20 and 18, tall young men who looked nothing like Earl, but everything like their mother. They stood awkwardly at the foot of the bed, not knowing what to say. Hey, Grandpa, Michael said. You gave us a scare. I'm all right. Mom says you're fighting to keep the farm. That's right, Daniel spoke up. Grandpa, Mom showed us that tube, the map. That's pretty cool that you never opened it for all those years. Your great-grandfather asked me not to. But why are you? Michael asked. Weren't you curious? Of course I was curious, but being curious isn't the same as needing to know. The boys looked at each other. They didn't understand. How could they? They had grown up in the city, in a world where information was instant, where secrets were temporary, where nothing stayed hidden for long. Grandpa, Michael said, what if you had opened it and there was nothing inside? Would you still have kept the promise? It was the same question Sarah had asked. The same question Earl had asked himself 1,000 times. Yes, Earl said, because the promise wasn't about what was in the tube. It was about trust. On the 4th day, Dr. Brennan discharged him with stern warnings and a bag full of prescriptions. Sarah drove him home. The trip took 45 minutes. They drove in silence, neither of them knowing what to say. At home, Sarah helped him up the stairs to his bedroom. He was weak, shaky. The stairs that he had climbed 10,000 times now felt like a mountain. He had to stop twice to rest. In his bedroom, Sarah turned down the bed. Earl sat on the edge, exhausted. Every movement took effort. Dad, Sarah said, I'm staying here until the trial. I'm not leaving you alone. You don't have to. Yes, I do, and don't argue. I already talked to my principal. I'm taking family leave. My class has a substitute for the rest of the semester. Sarah, your students. We'll be fine. You're more important. She left him to rest. Earl lay down on the bed fully clothed. He closed his eyes. The room spun slightly. He felt like he was floating untethered. He thought about the trial now only 11 days away. He thought about Curtis Deane and Meridian Land Partners and the 847 properties. He thought about promises and trust and what it meant to keep your word even when it cost everything. He did not sleep. Not really. He drifted in and out, half awake, half dreaming. On May 10th, 5 days before the trial, Tom Reedy came to the house. He brought files and documents and a legal pad covered in notes. They sat at the kitchen table. Sarah made coffee. The three of them looked at each other, knowing this was the final preparation. "Earl, are you sure you're strong enough for this?" Reedy asked. "I'll be there." "You don't have to be. I can handle the trial without you. You can watch on Zoom from home." "No, I'll be there in person." Reedy nodded. He knew better than to argue. "All right, let me walk you through what's going to happen. The trial will last 2 days, maybe 3. Judge Hendricks doesn't waste time. We present our case first. Expert testimony from Janet Kowalski about the survey. Expert testimony from Dr. Paul Fisher about the map authentication. Testimony from a title historian I've hired, Dr. Rebecca Shaw from the University of Iowa, about the pattern of errors in Margaret Holloway's work. Then you testify. What will they ask, Gwen? Krauss is going to try to discredit you. He'll ask why you never opened the tube before. He'll suggest you fabricated the map. He'll try to make you look like you're making this up to avoid losing the land. He'll be aggressive, confrontational. Don't let him rattle you. Just tell the truth. That's all I know how to do. Good. After you testify, we present the whistleblower documents, the emails, the spreadsheets, the target lists. This is our nuclear weapon. This proves systematic fraud. This shows that Meridian deliberately targets vulnerable elderly farmers. This changes everything. Will Judge Hendricks allow it? She has to. It's relevant. It's probative. It goes directly to Meridian's credibility and intent. Krauss will object. He'll claim the documents were obtained illegally. But even if she doesn't allow them as evidence, the information will be out there. We'll leak it to the press. We'll send it to the Attorney General. One way or another, this story is going to be told. They worked for 3 hours, going through every detail, every piece of evidence, every potential question. By the end, Earl was exhausted. His chest hurt. His head hurt. But he felt ready, as ready as he would ever be. That night, he could not sleep. He lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, his mind racing. He thought about everything that had led to this moment. The phone call from Sarah, the auction notice, the tube, the map, the confrontation at the courthouse, Frank Morrison's tears, the whistleblower documents, the heart attack. All of it had led here, to this trial, to this final stand. At 4 in the morning, he gave up trying to sleep. He went downstairs and made coffee. He sat at the kitchen table and watched the sky lighten. Dawn came slowly, as it always did, gray, giving way to pale blue, giving way to gold. Sarah came down at 6. She made breakfast, eggs and toast and bacon. Earl ate because she insisted, though he tasted nothing. "Are you scared?" Sarah asked. Earl thought about the question. Was he scared? Yes. He was scared of losing, scared of dying, scared of failing everyone who was counting on him. But he was also something else. He was resolved. He was determined. He was at peace with whatever came next. "Yes," he said, "but I'm ready." The morning of May 15th was clear and cold. The temperature had dropped overnight, an unexpected cold snap. There was frost on the grass when Earl looked out the window. The fields were silver in the early light. Sarah drove. Earl sat in the passenger seat, his hands folded in his lap. He wore his best clothes. A dark suit he had bought for Lorraine's funeral, a white shirt, a blue tie that Sarah had helped him knot, black shoes that Sarah had polished the night before. He looked like he was going to a funeral. Maybe he was. They arrived at the courthouse at 8:30. The trial was set for 9. The courthouse steps were crowded. Earl recognized faces, neighbors, friends, People from church. Frank Morrison was there standing near the front wearing the same too-big suit. Dale Hoskins, Jim Patterson, other farmers whose names Earl knew. There were also reporters, 3 local TV stations, the Des Moines Register, the Iowa Public Radio, someone from the Associated Press. Word had gotten out about the whistleblower documents. This was news now, not just a property dispute, but a story about corporate fraud and elderly exploitation. Earl walked through the crowd. People reached out to touch his shoulder, to shake his hand, to say good luck. Frank Morrison gripped Earl's hand with both of his. "Thank you," Frank said. "Whatever happens, thank you." Inside, the courtroom was packed, every seat filled, people standing in the back. The air was warm, too many bodies in too small a space. Earl sat at the plaintiff's table with Tom Reedy. His hands were shaking. He folded them together to stop the shaking, but it didn't work. Across the aisle, Curtis Dean sat with Daniel Kraus, but there was someone else with them now. An older man, maybe 60, with silver hair and an expensive suit. He looked like money. He looked like power. "That's Richard Vance," Reedy whispered to Earl, "CEO of Meridian. He flew in from Dallas last night." "Why so?" "Because he knows what's coming. He's here to do damage control." At 9 o'clock, Judge Patricia Hendricks entered. Everyone stood. She sat. Everyone sat. "This is case number LALA-25-00347, Earl Bristow versus Riverbend Asset Holdings, LLC, regarding property located at Section 14, Township 76, Range 28, Madison County, Iowa. This is a trial to the court on the question of title. Mr. Reedy, you may present your case." Reedy stood. "Your Honor, this case is about truth. The truth about who owns the south 120 acres of the Bristow property. The truth about how a 70-year-old clerical error was deliberately exploited. And the truth about what happens when a corporation targets vulnerable people for profit." Kraus objected immediately. "Your Honor, counsel is making inflammatory statements." Overruled. Mr. Reedy, proceed. The first witness was Janet Kowalski. She took the stand, was sworn in, and testified about her survey. She explained how she had used GPS and modern surveying techniques to verify the 1932 map. She showed aerial photographs, measurements, coordinates. She was clear, precise, unshakable. Kraus cross-examined. He tried to suggest her measurements could be wrong. She shut him down with data. He tried to suggest the GPS could be inaccurate. She explained the technology in terms so technical that even Judge Hendricks looked lost. He gave up after 20 minutes. The second witness was Dr. Paul Fisher, the forensic document examiner. He testified about the paper, the ink, the handwriting. He had analyzed the map using carbon dating, ink chromatography, paper fiber analysis. Every test confirmed the map was from 1932. Kraus challenged the methodology. Fisher explained it in exhaustive detail. He had tested 3 separate samples. He had compared the results to known documents from the same era. The margin of error was less than 5 years. The map was authentic. The third witness was Dr. Rebecca Shaw, the title historian from the University of Iowa. She testified about Margaret Holloway and the pattern of errors. She had found 7 properties with similar discrepancies, all processed by Holloway between 1954 and 1959. She had found evidence that Holloway had connections to a real estate developer who was active in Madison County during that period. Dr. Shaw, Reedy asked, "In your professional opinion, were these errors accidental?" "No, the pattern is too consistent. The measurements are too precise. Someone deliberately altered these property descriptions to reduce the size of the properties and create ambiguous titles that could later be challenged." "For what purpose?" "Likely for future exploitation, to create title defects that could be used to force sales decades later." Kraus objected. "Speculation, Your Honor." "I'll allow it. The witness is offering expert opinion." By the end of the first day, Reedy had built a strong case. The 1932 map was authentic. The current county records were wrong. Someone had deliberately altered those records 70 years ago. That night, Earl could barely eat. His chest hurt. His head throbbed. Sarah made him take his medication. She made him lie down. But he could not rest. Tomorrow he would testify. Tomorrow would be the crucial day. The next morning, Earl took the stand. He raised his right hand and swore to tell the truth. He sat in the witness chair. The courtroom was silent, everyone watching. Reedy questioned him first. Simple questions. How long have you owned the land? Who owned it before you? Have you paid your taxes? Earl answered each one carefully, his voice steady. Mr. Bristow, can you tell the court about the cardboard tube your father gave you in 1981? My father gave it to me when he transferred the farm to me. He told me never to sell the south half of the property. He said the reason was in the tube. Did you open it? No. Why not? Because he told me I didn't need to. For how long did you keep it sealed? 44 years. There was a murmur in the courtroom. Judge Hendricks raised her hand for silence. Mr. Bristow, why didn't you open it? Weren't you curious? I was curious, but I trusted my father. He said I didn't need to open it unless something happened, so I didn't. What changed? Riverbend tried to auction my land. That's when I opened it. Reedy walked Earl through the rest of the story. The auction notice, opening the tube, finding the map, stopping the auction, everything that had led to this moment. Then it was Krause's turn. He stood and walked toward the witness stand slowly like a predator approaching prey. Mr. Bristow, you claim you kept that cardboard tube sealed for 44 years. Yes. That's absurd, isn't it? No, sir. You expect this court to believe that you never once in 44 years looked inside that tube. Yes. Why should we believe that? Because it's the truth. Krause stepped closer. Mr. Bristow, isn't it convenient that this map appears now just when you need it? Just when you're about to lose your land? I've had the map since 1981. I didn't know I needed it until March. Or you made it in March. No, sir. You could have drawn that map yourself. You could have aged the paper. You could have faked the ink. I'm a farmer, Mr. Krause. I don't know how to fake a 90-year-old map. You could have hired someone. I didn't. Krause walked back to his table and picked up a document. Mr. Bristow, you've had multiple opportunities over the years to sell or lease the south 120 acres. In 1985, Dale Hoskins offered to buy it. In 1998, a hog operation wanted to lease it. In 2009, a wind energy company made an offer. You turned them all down. Why? Because my father told me not to sell it, even though you didn't know why. Yes, that's not rational. No, sir, it's faithful. There was a murmur in the courtroom again. Earl saw people nodding. Frank Morrison had tears running down his face. Krause pressed on. Mr. Bristow, you've paid property taxes for 45 years based on the current county records. Records that show your property boundaries 660 feet north of where your map shows them. You never questioned those records. You never filed any objection. By paying those taxes, didn't you effectively accept those boundaries? I paid what they told me to pay. I didn't know the records were wrong. But you had the map. You could have checked. I didn't open the map until March. That's your story. It's the truth. Krause walked closer again. He was trying to intimidate Earl to make him nervous. But Earl had faced worse. He had faced his wife's death. He had faced his wife's death. He had faced a heart attack. This was just a man in an expensive suit asking questions. Mr. Bristow, how much money have you spent on this case so far? About $50,000. $50,000. Your life savings? Most of it, yes. And if you lose everything. The land and the money. Yes. That's a lot of incentive to fabricate evidence, isn't it? Tom Reedy stood. Objection. Argumentative. Sustained. Kraus tried a different approach. Mr. Bristow, you're 74 years old. Yes. You've had health problems recently, a heart attack. Yes. This case has put tremendous stress on you. Yes. Wouldn't it be easier to just accept the settlement, offer my client has made, take the money and move on? Earl looked at Kraus, then he looked at Curtis Dean, then at Richard Vance. Three men in expensive suits who saw him as an obstacle, a problem to be solved with money. No, Earl said. It wouldn't be easier because this isn't about money. This is about keeping a promise, about honoring trust, about making sure that what my grandfather built and my father protected doesn't get stolen by people who've never walked that land, who've never understood what it means. His voice grew stronger. My grandfather broke that land with his hands. He worked 30 years to save enough money to buy it. He gave it to my father. My father gave it to me. And I'll be damned if I let someone take it because of a 70-year-old clerical error that you people are exploiting for profit. The courtroom erupted. People were on their feet. Someone was clapping. Judge Hendricks banged her gavel. Order, order in this court. The room quieted. Kraus looked rattled. He had lost control of the cross-examination. No further questions, Your Honor. Mr. Bristow, you may step down. Earl stood. His legs were shaky, but he made it back to his seat. Reedy squeezed his shoulder. You did great. After a brief recess, Reedy stood. Your Honor, I have additional evidence I'd like to present. New evidence that came to light in March. Kraus stood immediately. Objection, Your Honor, Mr. Reedy failed to disclose this evidence during discovery. Your Honor, Reedy said, we received these documents 3 weeks ago from an anonymous source. We had them authenticated by a digital forensics expert. They are internal communications from Meridian Land Partners. They prove systematic fraud. Judge Hendricks frowned. Approach the bench. Reedy and Kraus walked to the bench. There was a whispered conference. Earl could not hear what was being said, but he could see Judge Hendricks' face. She looked angry. She waved them back. I'm going to allow the evidence, she said, but I'm not pleased about the timing, Mr. Reedy. You should have disclosed this earlier. Understood, Your Honor, but the evidence speaks for itself. Reedy presented the documents. The emails from Curtis Dane and Richard Vance. The spreadsheets with 847 properties. The target lists. The strategy memos about moving quickly before elderly farmers could mount effective resistance. The courtroom went completely silent as Reedy read excerpts aloud. These elderly farmers tend to get emotional about their land. Once they understand what's happening, many will fight back. Our advantage is speed. We need completed sales before they can mount effective resistance. People were shaking their heads. Someone in the back said, Jesus Christ. Judge Hendricks did not call for order. Reedy continued, Your Honor, these documents show that Meridian Land Partners has systematically targeted 847 properties across Iowa. They deliberately focus on elderly property owners. They send legal notices to addresses they know are outdated. They schedule auctions for times and places designed to minimize attendance. This is not legitimate business. This is predatory fraud. Kraus stood. He looked pale. Your Honor, these documents, even if authentic, were obtained illegally. They're privileged internal communications. Mr. Kraus, Judge Hendricks interrupted, I'll worry about how they were obtained later. Right now, I'm going to read them. All of them. She spent 20 minutes reading through the documents. The courtroom waited. When she finished, she set them down and looked at Curtis Dean and Richard Vance. Mr. Dean, she said, I'd like to ask you some questions. Please take the stand. Dean looked at Kraus. Kraus looked at Vance. Vance nodded slightly. Dean stood and walked to the witness stand. He raised his right hand and was sworn in. He sat down. He looked like he wanted to be anywhere else. Mr. Dane, Judge Hendricks said, did you write these emails? A long pause, then barely audible. Yes, Your Honor. The emails that discuss targeting elderly farmers. The emails that talk about moving quickly before they can mount effective resistance. Those emails, yes. And these spreadsheets, the list of 847 properties across Iowa, did you create these? Yes. And you specifically targeted Mr. Bristow because he's elderly, living alone, and you thought he wouldn't fight back. We identified his property as having a title discrepancy that we could pursue. That's not what I asked. Did you target him because you thought he was vulnerable? Dean did not answer. Mr. Dion answered the question. Yes. The courtroom erupted again. Judge Hendricks banged her gavel, but this time she let people talk for a moment before calling for order. Mr. Dean, how many properties has Meridian taken using this method? In Madison County 17. Across Iowa. I don't have that number. A rough estimate. Maybe 100. Judge Hendricks leaned back in her chair. She looked disgusted. Mr. Dean, you may step down. Mr. Vance, I'd like you to approach the bench. Richard Vance stood. He walked to the bench slowly, his face expressionless. He stood before the judge like a man accustomed to power, unworried. Mr. Vance, you're the CEO of Meridian Land Partners. Yes, Your Honor. Are you aware of the practices described in these documents? A pause. Vance was calculating, deciding how to answer. Your Honor, these documents have been taken out of context. That's not what I asked. Are you aware that your company systematically targets elderly farmers? Your Honor, we operate within the law. We identify properties with title defects and we pursue legitimate legal claims. By sending notices to addresses you know are wrong, we send notices to the addresses listed in county records. That's what the law requires. Even when you know those addresses are outdated, Your Honor, we can't be held responsible for inaccurate county records. Judge Hendricks stared at him. Mr. Vance, I've been a judge for 3 years. Before that, I was a prosecutor for 15 years. I've seen a lot of criminals. Some of them were violent. Some were stupid. But the worst ones, the ones I remember, were the ones like you. Smart, educated, rich. People who should know better but choose not to. People who exploit others for profit and justify it by saying it's legal. She paused. I'm going to be very clear. What your company has done is wrong. Whether it's technically legal or not, it's wrong. And I'm going to do everything in my power to stop it. She looked at the courtroom. I'm ruling in favor of the plaintiff. Mr. Bristow's title to the South 120 acres is valid and has been valid continuously since 1928. The 1956 clerical error does not supersede the 1932 survey. Riverbend Asset Holdings' claim is dismissed with prejudice. The courtroom exploded. People were on their feet, cheering, clapping. Frank Morrison was sobbing. Dale Hoskins was shaking his head in disbelief. Sarah had her arms around Earl, hugging him so tight he could barely breathe. Judge Hendricks banged her gavel. I'm not finished. Furthermore, I'm referring this matter to the Iowa Attorney General for criminal investigation, and I'm referring it to the FBI for investigation of possible wire fraud and racketeering. Mr. Vance, Mr. Diane, you'll be hearing from them. She banged the gavel one final time. This court is adjourned. The gavel came down with a crack that echoed like thunder. Earl sat in the chair, unable to move. He had won. After everything, he had won. Sarah was crying. Reedy was shaking his hand. People were crowding around the table trying to congratulate him. Frank Morrison pushed through the crowd and grabbed Earl's hand. You did it, Frank said. You actually did it. We're not done, Earl said. We're going to get your land back too. All of you. I promise. Outside the courthouse, reporters were waiting. Cameras, microphones, questions shouted from all directions. Earl stood on the steps, Sarah on one side, Tom Reedy on the other. Behind them, Frank and Dale and Jim and the other farmers who had lost their land. Mr. Bristow, how do you feel? Earl looked at the cameras, at the reporters, at the crowd gathered on the courthouse square. He thought about what to say. I feel grateful, he said. Grateful that the truth came out. Grateful that Judge Hendricks had the courage to stand up to a powerful corporation. grateful that my family's land is safe. What about the other farmers who lost their property? We're going to fight for them too. If what Meridian did to me was fraud, then what they did to all 17 families in Madison County was fraud. We're going to make it right. Do you have a message for Meridian land partners? Earl looked directly at the camera. Stop. Stop targeting elderly people. Stop exploiting clerical errors. Stop stealing land from families who've worked it for generations. And if you don't stop, we'll stop you. In court, with criminal charges, whatever it takes. The crowd cheered. 2 weeks later, Meridian Land Partners offered a settlement. $1.1 million in damages to Earl Wall, plus full payment of his legal fees, plus a permanent injunction preventing them from operating in Iowa, plus an agreement to settle with the other 16 Madison County families whose land had been taken. Earl sat in Tom Reedy's office reading the settlement offer. What do you think, Reedy asked. What about the criminal charges? The Attorney General is moving forward with those regardless. This settlement doesn't affect the criminal case. Meridian is trying to limit their civil liability. And the other families, they each get their land back or equivalent compensation if the land has been developed, plus damages. Meridian is paying out about $15 million total. Earl thought about Frank Morrison, about his wife Helen's grave, about the promise Frank had made. Tell them we accept, on one condition. What's that? They establish a fund, a legal defense fund for family farmers across Iowa. If any other company tries what Meridian tried, farmers can access this fund for legal representation. $10 million. That's my condition. Reedy smiled. I'll tell them. 3 days later, Meridian agreed to all terms. The settlement was signed, the money was transferred, the legal defense fund was established. Earl received a check for $1.1 million, the largest amount of money he had ever seen. He stared at it for a long time sitting at his kitchen table. Then he endorsed it and deposited it in his account. He paid off all his legal bills. He repaid Sarah the $15,000 she had given him. He set aside $500,000 for his grandson's education. The rest, $570,000, he donated to the Legal Defense Fund. Combined with Meridian's $10 million, the fund now had over $10 million to help farmers fight corporate land grabs. Sarah was in the kitchen when he told her. She stared at him. Dad, you just gave away more than half the settlement. I know. Why? Because Frank Morrison and the others need it more than I do. Because this was never about the money. And because if I can help one other family keep their land, then everything we went through was worth it. Sarah hugged him. She was crying again, but this time they were happy tears. That summer, Earl walked the south fence line with Sarah. It was a Sunday afternoon in June, warm and clear. The sky was blue. The fields were green. The corn in the neighboring fields was knee-high. The grass in Earl's pasture was thick and lush. They walked slowly, not talking much, just walking. Earl's chest still hurt sometimes, but less now. The medication helped. The rest helped more. He had gained back some of the weight he had lost. His color was better. At the southwest corner, they stopped. Earl put his hand on the corner post, the same post Henry had set in 1929. The same post that had stood for 96 years. Grandpa set this, Sarah asked, though she already knew the answer. Yes. And it's still here. Yes. She put her hand on the post beside his. I'm going to tell Michael and Daniel about the tube, about what you did, about why it matters. When po, soon, went on Deveredum. What will you tell them? That trust is the inheritance that matters most. That some promises are worth keeping even when you don't understand them. That land isn't just property, it's history and family and obligation. Earl looked out at the fields. The land rolled away to the south, green and alive under the summer sun. 3 generations of Bristows had walked this ground, 4 counting Sarah, 5 counting her boys. and hopefully more after that. Some things last, he said. Yes, Sarah said. Some things do. They turned and walked back along the fence line. The sun was lowering toward the horizon, the light turning gold. The shadows were long. Behind them, the corner post stood solid and unmoved, holding the line the way it had held the line for almost a century. When they reached the house, Earl went inside. He climbed the stairs slowly using the railing, but he made it without stopping. His chest didn't hurt. In the sewing room, he opened the closet. He pulled out a new cardboard tube from the shelf. Inside was a copy of the 1932 map, a copy of Judge Hendrick's ruling, newspaper clippings about the trial, and a letter he had written to Michael and Daniel. The letter said, "To my grandsons, Michael and Daniel, your great-great-grandfather Henry broke this land with his hands and a team of mules, so shows. Your great-grandfather William kept it through depression and war and hard times. I kept it through my own battles. Now it's your mother's, and one day it will be yours." In this tube is a map. It's the true line of our land drawn in 1932 by a county surveyor named J.R. Whitlock. But more important than the map is what it represents. The truth doesn't change just because someone writes something different down. Stand for truth even when it's hard, especially when it's hard. I never opened this tube for 44 years. I didn't need to. I trusted my father, and he trusted his father before him. That trust is your inheritance. The land will pass to you, money will pass to you, but the trust, the faith that what you're given is worth keeping, worth fighting for, worth protecting, that's what makes you a Bristow. Your grandfather told me once that some inheritances are money and some are land, but the rarest and most valuable is the instruction. The single sentence passed from one generation to the next, kept on faith for decades without question. Here is my instruction to you: keep the South half. Whatever happens, whatever offers you receive, whatever pressures you face, keep it. The reason is in this tube. You'll know when you need to know. Until then, trust me. That's all I ask. Your grandfather Earl, he rolled the letter and the documents carefully. He slid them into the tube. He capped it. He would give it to Sarah tomorrow. She would know when to give it to the boys. That night, Earl sat at the kitchen table. The house was quiet. Sarah had gone back to Des Moines. Outside, the stars were bright. The fields were dark and still. He thought about Henry, about William, about Lorraine, about all the people who had walked this ground before him and all the people who would walk it after. Some inheritances are money, some are land. The rarest and most valuable is the instruction. The single sentence passed from one generation to the next, kept on faith without question, carried like a torch through the darkness. Don't sell the South half. 4 words, 3 generations, 97 years. The line had held. Earl Bristow was 74 years old. He had lived in this house for 68 years. He had fought for it. He had almost died for it. And he had won. He stood and walked to the window. The fields stretched out in the moonlight, silver and peaceful. The fence line was a dark thread across the landscape. The corner post stood where Henry had planted it almost a century ago. Tomorrow the sun would rise. The land would still be here. The promise would still be kept. The trust would still hold. And when the time came, Sarah would pass it on to Michael, to Daniel, to their children. The line would hold.